Bangor Council to give some introductory remarks. It's Brian. We're good.
All right. Hello? Okay. Thank you. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to say on behalf of Bangor Borough, I want to thank all of you for coming here, and I especially want to thank the countless businesses, volunteers, and donors who helped make this day a possibility. Without them, we would not be able to bring home a piece of our history. And I'm proud to say we have home a piece of Bangor history, not just Bangor, but the entire Slate Belt. And to talk more about this will be Jim Gloria. Jim, thank you.
Thank you. My partner in crime for this, and really the spark that initiated this, was Mike Pearson. Now, Mike's a historian for the National Industrial Museum. You probably all know that. So I'm just going to bring him up to really talk about the inception of the project and the history of the hoist and what it means to the community. Mike?
Thank you for having me. So what I'd like to do is give you a relatively brief introduction to the history of the hoist and what happened here. At some point I really should write a book about this and all of the equipment that was saved from the quarries. But for right now, for those of you, I know there's some of you who aren't from the area, slate was first discovered around here in 1836 in Slateford. And then in 1853, Robert Chapman and Joseph Keller were hunting in Penargil, and they discovered slate there. And that's where our story with the slate company's Penargil really starts taking off and growing. And the key year for a couple of big pieces here is 1878. That's when the Stevens-Jackson Company was formed. If anybody wants to raise their hand from that family, we do have a representative here today. Yep, Scott's in the background there. His great-great-great-grandfather, hopefully I got that right, was Henry Stevens. He, along with Richard Jackson Jr. and Fletcher Turner, formed the Stevens-Jackson Slate Company. And it had a couple of names over the years, depending on how they organized it. And also in that same year, right here in Bangor, literally a block and a half that way, where the CVS is at today, Flory Manufacturing was established. Solomon and Samuel Flory started building steam engines. They called themselves initially the Bangor Foundry and Machine Works. And their business grew and grew. They had the benefit of having the North Bangor Quarry immediately behind them, so they could go up there, look at their engines, test designs, come back to the factory down the hill, modify them, build them. And by 1900, they were building 250 of these things a year. They were shipping them all across the world. A lot of them wound up in the coal mines, and there's still some in use in Schuylkill County today, and also at the quarries in Northampton and Lehigh County. Flory, if you go inside and see the Heritage Center or slideshow, you can see there's a slide that shows old advertisements. They says Flory's middle name is Dependability, and I think you're going to see that proven again today. So in 1900, the quarry was expanding, and they went and they purchased, as far as we know, this hoist. The early years of this hoist are kind of murky. About 1/4 of the records from the manufacturing company survive, so it's very likely this one was purchased by Stevens-Jackson and used there. But either way, in 1948, it went to its location that I found it in. It was in that year that the quarry had the easternmost wall collapse. A worker, Joseph Heater, is still buried down there today. They just could not dig him out. So what they did, besides just abandoning that part of the operation, was they shifted the operations to the west. And if you ever drive down near the landfill, up until about a decade and a half ago, you could have seen the engine houses up on the embankment there. And that's where this engine was located at, in a series of 3 engines that operated the western end of that quarry pit. So that ran from 1948 until 1980. Then in November of 1980, Andrew Polo and Oscar Flight, they were the engineer and backup engineers for this, made the last lift with it, and then it just sat. My personal involvement came about in 2004. I heard that there was going to be a Walmart constructed at the site of the Lehigh New England Roundhouse. That never actually happened, but it prompted us to go in and do a photo documentation of it. And while I was walking around, we met Ron Perrin. He started talking about the steam engines that used to run the hoist at Ashley Plains up in the coal region where he was from. And he said, those are long gone, but you should go see John Daly. There's still some hoisting engines left at his quarries that are just sitting idle. So I got in touch with John. We went up to see them. And parents' description of the hoist didn't match what we actually found, so I realized there must be more than one. So John let us explore the quarry. I spent the whole day up there just between two quarries seeing what's survived. It was just amazed. It was really a time capsule of Victorian era technology. The following year I was showing my friend Robert Yule from Alabama, rail fans will know him from the 611 project, through the quarries. And on the way out we went to thank John Daly for letting us look around, and he said, by the way, the property was sold. We're going to start clearing this stuff out. So I asked if I could try saving some of the equipment, and he said yes, right on the spot. So that began the project of actually getting these things out of here and finding them new homes. So the incredible thing about this hoist here is it was never intended to go to downtown Bangor. This was on its way to a museum in Maryland in 2010, but they didn't pay their rigging bill, so the rigging company had to get stuck in their yard, and the township was on them to move it out because it was close to the road. So I asked them, like, what can we do about this? And they said, pay the rigging bill and you can have it. So we put $2,300 on a credit card. And after that, we got some donors to pay it back. We put it in storage. My boss, Steve, at the museum gave us some storage space for it. And we started looking for a place to put this thing on permanent exhibition. So that eventually led to the Slate Belt Heritage Center. Some of their members talked to the Borough of Bangor and actually some other townships. So this was not the only place interested in this machine. And eventually, actually I shouldn't say eventually, it happened really fast. Once the wheels got going, Bangor said, yes, we'd love to have it. And they also said, which was very smart of them, you're not just going to put it on display, you're going to build a roof over it, and you're going to do it with no taxpayer money. And here's an organization to help you, the Slate Belt Community Partnership and Totskap Arts Institute. So working with those two groups, we began the process of finding a volunteer architect, finding helpers to do things like donate the wood, cut the lumber, and Jim's going to tell you more about these donors later. But from 2014 until today, that was the project of getting this thing done. And Hoist arrived here in 2016. Bob Dahmer, he's around here. His truck delivered it. Yep. We blocked it down manually, no crane at that point. And then we started the mechanical restoration, which we actually started in Bethlehem earlier. We had volunteers working on it piece by piece and made some great progress. Then we had some local shops here and in New Jersey make some parts to finish it up. And Bill Hazard from King of Prussia did some machine work on the cylinders for us. And within a couple of years, we actually had this thing running, and we're going to hand it off to Bill McCarthy to tell us about the actual construction of the pavilion over the top of it.
Hey, Mike. The little red light open, but I don't see anything on the screen.
Hello, my name is Bill McCarthy, and I had a business called Restoration Millwork, and I was involved in doing architectural woodwork for old buildings being restored all around the Lehigh Valley and in eastern Pennsylvania, and occasionally in Philadelphia and elsewhere. And Mike got me involved in this project and said what they wanted to do, and I thought it'd be a great idea to have a timber frame sort of period correct building to build over the engine. And so I started working on a design. I had previously, like 35 years ago, built 2 timber frame buildings, and so I started working on the design, and the design's fairly basic timber frame. It's 20 foot by 20 foot, and then I thought it would be nice to include the clear story on the roof so that you get more light in. And the only part that was a little challenging was on a timber frame, it's basically 3 sections, and they're connected up with beams on top, and each section is referred to as a bent, and they use the same term on a barn. Now in the center, it had to be a clear span. There couldn't be a post. If you look at the end bents, there's a post in the middle, and in the center it had to be trussed. So designing that truss was interesting, and there's some iron tie rods in there. And so I got the plans finished, and then I found out that they had to be approved by an architect, and I had a very good friend who was an architect, restoration architect named Ben Walbert from Allentown. And we've done work together for years and years. And unfortunately, Ben passed away about 1.5 years ago, so otherwise he would be here. And so I gave the plans to Ben, and then he put his stamp on them, approved them, and then we got started on the construction. And thanks to Hurricane Sandy, we had a ready supply of wood from Jim Gloria's property. And so then I forget some of these names, but they'll be mentioned later. A local sawmill sawed up the logs, and I can compliment them that they were right on dimension, which oftentimes these small sawmills, they're used to cutting, blocking, and things like that, and they're not too fussy, but they were pretty much right on dimension. And then, so Mike Pierce got a group of volunteers together that were willing to learn how to do timber framing. And so I drew up the plans, and at first when I showed them the plans, their kind of eyes glazed over, didn't quite understand them. So I thought, you know what, I need to make a model. So I made a model of the trusses about this wide, about yay high, with all the exact same joints you see here. So I said, just look at the model, take it apart, see how everything's done. And so that worked wonders. And so I worked with them maybe about 25% of the whole time it took to put this together. And I can compliment them that when the project's all done, that I'll give them an A+ on timber framing, because they were